All right. Hello, everyone. Hi. Hello, hello. Hi, everyone. Can you all hear me? Can we get a clap? Two claps? Nice. Hi, everyone. It's great to have you all here. This is the fourth iQuHACK 2023. Our opening ceremony, and we also have a keynote panel planned for y'all today. So I'm going to kick this off, and we're going to talk about what is MIT iQuHACK, what is the plan, and who made it happen. So what is MIT iQuHACK? iQuHACK is MIT's annual quantum computing hackathon. iQuHACK's mission is to bring together, expand, and educate the local and global quantum computing community following MIT's motto of mens et manus, minds in hand. That means y'all are going to get together and make some really cool projects. So some quick facts. Where did we start? We started off in iQuHACK 2020. It was an in-person event. We had 55 participants, 3 corporate sponsors, 5 MIT faculty, 5 coaches, and judges from industry. It was an awesome start. In 2021, as y'all know, we had to go virtual. We had 219 participants, 6 corporate sponsors, 6 judges, 16 coaches and judges from industry. 2022, we stayed virtual. We had 400 participants, 57 countries represented, 10 corporate sponsors, and many mentors and judges from academia. And y'all may have seen a trend here. We're getting bigger, and we like to think better every single year. And here is an older slide where we made projections for 2023. We prepared a hybrid event where we planned for 250 people in person, 1,000 people virtual, 15 corporate sponsors, and many academic and industry mentors and judges. What did we actually do? 280 people in person, 1.2 thousand people remote, 70 countries, and 16 sponsors. We well overshot, our initial goal, and I think that's a message here. You're going to make a lot of goals at the beginning of hackathon, and I think you're going to surprise yourself, what you do by the end of it. So what's the plan? Friday, today, is all about learning. It's about these keynote panels, it's about workshops, and it's about networking and finding your team. Tomorrow is all about hacking, mentoring, and we also have one of the largest quantum career fairs set up here at MIT in the world. So lots of opportunities for recruiting. And on Sunday, it's all about celebrating. It's about taking those projects that you work so hard to put together, presenting them, attending these lightning talks from all kinds of sponsors, and getting your projects judged and getting some prizes for those challenges. And finally, we're going to end on a social to say goodbye and celebrate all the friendships that y'all are sure to make this weekend. We have an immersive experience planned here at MIT. As you can see, we have some of the best classrooms at MIT planned for you all. We have Walker Memorial Hall, which is a huge space. It's one of MIT's landmarks, and that's where we're going to have all our hacking, all of our sponsors. And we have a night at the MIT Museum planned. So this is really exciting, This is all thanks to the MIT Museum for being so accommodating, and this is an overnight hack. This is a truly 24-hour hack. So who made it happen? Well, first of all, we have all these amazing sponsors. As I mentioned, we have 16 sponsors spanning industries, spanning the quantum tech stack. And at the very top, you can see all of our challenge providers. These are the people and sponsors that are providing all the challenges y'all will be working on. And we have this whole quantum community that's come together to support you and to make some really cool things happen. And I really want to shout out at the very bottom, you see iQuISE. iQuISE is our student organization here, and you see the MIT Center for Quantum Engineering. MIT CQE is our parent organization, and RLE is their parent organization. So these 3 organizations is what made this event happen. So we're really grateful for the student and for the larger MIT community that has made this event happen. What about the people? Here we have the MIT iQuHACK board, and I want to just point out that each of these people have been working working an insane amount of time to put this event together, and they've really put in their passion and their sweat and all their hard work. And we have people spanning, postdocs. We have people spanning graduate students, spanning MBA students, spanning undergrads. So it really takes the whole community to put this all together. These are the people that you can ask questions about anything. These are the people that have made everything here happen. We also have a lot of Jedi supporting us. All the people who have, helped us book these spaces, helped us get all that swag and food, helped us make sure that we are compliant and safe. And so a huge thank you to them and to our many staff, our mentors, our judges, and more. So what's next? Well, while you're here, MIT is your home. So please take care of it. Please clean up after yourself, respect this space, and understand that you, while you're here, represent MIT iQuHACK. Share your memories and tag us. Hashtag iQuHACK and iQuISE, and most importantly, enjoy your time here. And aligned with this mission, we have a special prize planned that I'll be able to announce right now. It's called the iQuHACK Social Impact Prize. Oh, prize. And there's a prize for both in-person and for remote. And the idea is this is based off of nominations by other teams that will be submitted by the end of the event. And the criteria is really simple, the most helpful team. And this could be helpful in many ways, understanding concepts, understanding SDKs, just being there to listen and bounce off ideas, right? So the mission of this prize is to help us build a community, because this community, it starts here, but it doesn't end here. And there is an exciting surprise prize planned, and it's really cool. Yeah, so with that, I'm going to hand it off to Valeria. She is a postdoc in Dirk England's group, and she's our director of events, and she's been doing some amazing work to make this happen. So yeah, please, a round of applause for Valeria.
Thanks everybody for being here. I also want to thank all our speakers. Thank you a lot for accepting our invitation and for making it today. So we will start with a panel discussion about quantum computing and quantum technology. So we will have 5 panelists and one moderator. So they're all MIT professors. So we will have from the MIT Department of Electrical Engineering and Computer Science, we have Dirk England, Isaac Chuang, and William Oliver. Then we have Professor Dana Friedman from the Department of Chemistry, and Jonathan Wren from MIT Sloan. And then we have our moderator is Professor Kevin O'Brien, also from MIT ECS. So I hope you will all enjoy it. Thank you so much again for being here. And Kevin, the stage is yours.
Fantastic. Let's give Valeria a round of applause. Great, thank you. So I'm super excited to hear what the panelists have to say. I hope you are as well. I'm going to ask a question just to kick things off, and we'll see where we go from there. So first off, this is to each of the panelists, and let's go in order, starting from Dana, going to Will and Ike, Jonathan, and Dirk. How did you become interested in quantum technology, and what was your path to joining the field? And keep in mind, our audience is these students here who want to participate in this really exciting second quantum revolution.
Okay, I will tell you the real story about how I became interested in quantum technologies. I don't know if it's inspiring or not. As a graduate student, I was broadly interested, and as an undergrad, in quantum things, but this was a long time ago. And in the area that I worked in the intro to a lot of the papers that my lab wrote, we said this work could be of relevance to magnetic storage or quantum science. Well, that wasn't a term back then, quantum computing. And at one point, I was writing a paper and went a little bit off track and started digging into all of the foundational references to see how this work could be useful for quantum computing. And I found out that it couldn't be, that the parameters that we were optimizing on were effectively orthogonal to the ones that were useful for quantum computing. And that was kind of fun, and it was also fun to chat with my advisor about that. I could have done that better. But that got me interested in, okay, there is a challenge. We're optimizing in the wrong direction. Could we start optimizing in the right direction? And that's something that became really interesting to me in my independent career after I left graduate school. There's this whole set of parameters where you can think about using synthetic chemistry to push in this direction that's effectively an open space, and everyone's optimizing in kind of the wrong direction. And I thought it would be a fun thing to work on.
Yeah, hi, my name's Will, and I got into quantum actually here at MIT. I was a master's student here in the ECS. I was working on signal processing, in particular signal processing of music, with Todd Mack over at the Media Lab. And at that time, I met Joe Jacobson, who I know Ike also knows, who's a professor here. And Joe was talking about, there's this guy out at Stanford, Yoshi Yamamoto, who's doing some really cool physics. And I was interested in quantum. I'd taken a number of the courses here. But after I got my master's degree, I went out to Stanford, and I met Yoshi, Professor Yamamoto. And I said, I'm really interested in quantum statistics. And he said, I got just the project for you. And it was very fortunate. For about 5 or 6 years, overlapping briefly with Ike, who was also there, I got to work on a project which had basically no practical application in real life, but it showed me, or introduced me, to quantum information, quantum entanglement, quantum statistics, and I just found that tremendously fascinating. And I also found fascinating something that Ike may tell you about, which was a dual rail approach to quantum computing. Because I wasn't working on quantum computing, but there were a lot of people in Yoshi's group who were starting to think about it. It was the very, very beginning, late 90s, early 2000s. And I read Ike's paper, and I thought, this is what I want to do. So after I graduated from Stanford with PhD, I came back here to MIT, started my career at Lincoln Lab, working on superconducting qubits. And I can tell you in 2003, in Ike's book, Mike and Ike, there were many modalities of qubits at that time, and there were the ones that were gonna probably work, and then there was everything else. And at that time, superconducting qubits was in the everything else chapter because didn't have much coherence, didn't know how to control it, didn't really know anything about them yet. But of course, in the last 20 years, they've now bubbled up to one of the major qubit modalities. So anyways, that's my story. Ike?
Hi, folks. I'm Ike Chuang. These are hard stories to follow and hard stories to start off. I was an undergraduate here at MIT some 30 years ago, and I couldn't make up my mind between departments. I started in course 6. How many of you are course 6 here? Wow, okay. How many of you are course 8? Oh, not so many. I started off in course 16, believe it or not, because I really love aerospace and large systems. I found that unified was too hard, and I switched to course 6. And course 6 was a little too easy for me. I found it boring. So then I switched. I think I wasn't appreciating it enough at that time. And so I then started course 8, but I really wanted something in between. I didn't like either 6 or 8 for what they were for themselves. And generally, a lot of these fields have become narrower and narrower and more specialized. But I like looking across vast expanses. And I found my inspiration in reading Richard Feynman's papers, who also has this sense of expansiveness. And I found one particular paper he wrote about optical implementations of quantum computers in Optics Express or Optics News. And wow, I was inspired. I really wanted to make this possible. But nobody else in the world wanted it. There was no reason to have it. I ended up at Stanford for graduate school, and I bounced around between several different professors who thought I was all crazy. And then I landed, finally, a new professor who had just joined, who probably didn't know any better, and I was able to convince him that I should be allowed to try to build a quantum computer in his lab. That was Yoshi Yamamoto. And so I was already thinking about how to build this when Peter Shor's paper about factoring came about. And I was able to explain how to take his idea and make it turn into something that is physically real. And that's what has started a lot of this journey for me. But I want to encourage you to try to do something. Think about something about your career and where it is today. I chose to go into quantum computing because nobody else was in the field, because it was not popular. I don't know that I would choose quantum computing as a field for myself today if I were in your shoes as a student. What I have been doing for the last 4 years at MIT is teaching machine learning, and not so much quantum computing. I would also not do machine learning if I were a student today. But maybe there's something in between that is not quantum machine learning, like it has to be something totally different. We are here to do different, surprising things. So maybe the most important thing about quantum computing is not that it is quantum and computing or quantum and machine learning, but that it is thinking about completely new directions and making completely new possibilities for technology, for science, and for fundamentals, for new discovery. And I hope that some of you will think in that way as well. And maybe I'll share more thoughts about this as we go along.
Great, thank you.
So I'm coming to you guys from a very different perspective. I'm at the Sloan School, and my faculty group is called Global Economics and Management. And then my research group is called the Initiative on the Digital Economy. So they probably all sound like generic businessy terms to a lot of people in this audience. But I'd pick out one or two words that I think might link into why all of you are here and why people in the Sloan and business community are interested. The one word I'd pick out is global. So you look at the potential that quantum computing offers over the long term, and it is one of those amazing technologies that has the potential to really have a global impact. So that's very interesting. In terms of the initiative on the digital economy, it's probably quite obvious to most people here, but quantum computing is, effectively a very digital type of technology. And that makes it very interesting. It's not the same as making steel and concrete and physical things. Although what we're actually trying to do in some of the labs around the world and here at MIT is actually very physical as well. So from a business point of view, those two things and the intersection of them are very interesting. And then I would say that of all those areas that I've talked about, my particular interest is in what's called nascent markets. And these are brand new markets that emerge into the economy. And they're quite well known for having a lot of ambiguity and complexity. But for most of those markets, if you think about something like Uber introducing the ride-hailing market, there's a lot of complexity, ambiguity, but they knew that cars could be driven and they knew people could use mobile phones. So as much complexity and ambiguity as there was in that nascent market, it pales in comparison to the complexity and ambiguity that's inherent in quantum computing. So that sounds like a real challenge, and that's what drew me into being interested in it. And then the final bit I'd add is that I feel very lucky to be in the Sloan School of Management. There's very few places, I think you could probably count them in one hand, where you have a business school that is in the same institution as having world-class researchers in quantum computing. And so, to some degree, I feel it's a challenge for us that here at MIT and at Sloan, we need to step up to and be the community that's leading the thinking on the business of quantum computing. So that's kind of what brought me here today.
Hey, everybody. My name is Dirk England. I'm a faculty here in electrical engineering and computer science. I started majoring at Caltech in physics and math, and I was interested in understanding the universe better. I was initially going towards cosmology, but then towards my junior year, I was sort of missing the constructiveness of experimental research. or being able to do an experiment, not just observe, but actually do an experiment, and by that way try to understand nature better. And then I joined the laboratory of Hideo Mabuchi, who had just started at that time in atomic physics, working at that time with Jeff Kimball. They had sort of a joint group. And so as a junior, I started to work in the lab, and it was fascinating that you could, on the tabletop, you could explore the frontiers of physics right in front of you. You didn't have to look up in the stars. And much of what sort of expresses that was a different way of fundamental physics that touches on information theory. Really, information theory might be the best way to describe the basic principles of physics. And in this way, really, I started to go into atomic physics, and then was thinking about Cambridge for grad school versus Stanford. I ended up going with the weather, so I went to Stanford, and I had this third connection here to Yoshi Yamamoto. I was joining at the time when Yoshi was just setting up a new experiment, and I would say I was going to, so at Stanford you can rotate, and so I was going to do Jelena Vukovic first, who was just starting her new group at that point, and then Yoshi after that. And I never left Jelena's group. And so I stayed in semiconductor quantum optics, and it's been going from here. But it's also a fantastic community, I would say, in quantum information science and in atomic molecular optical physics in particular. And so I think it's been a fantastic ride for me last 20 or so years in this field, and it's amazing. And it's a big surprise to see so many people now, so many young, awesome people who are going into this field now. I want to echo what Ike said also. I think a lot of us initially were drawn into that field in part because it was unexplored, and so in quantum computing, and in this field in general, there are still so many fields that are unexplored. I don't follow the Troughton path. There are many other directions to explore that in one way or another are connected to quantum computing. Quantum computing is much more than making a faster algorithm. It really teaches us about the fundamentals of nature. And so there's a lot to do.
Thank you all for telling us some of the things that inspired you to get here. So I'd like to go from the past to the present. And if you're willing, I'd like you to tell me one interesting question that you're trying to answer in your lab or group right now. Donna, if you'd like to start again, you're welcome to.
Sure. So what my lab does is we use chemistry for quantum information science. So we use the ability to put atoms exactly where you want to control both physical and electronic structure. And that's kind of great for quantum properties because precise control is everything that we talk about. Most of our work is focused on quantum sensing. And right now, actually, where I was half an hour ago was working on a manuscript draft that I'm really excited about, predicting whether a molecule where you can read out spin information can sense a local magnetic field of, for example, a 2D magnetic material like chromium triiodide. So the space between the surface of the material and, let's say, 10 nanometers away is essentially a completely blank space. Nobody knows what happens there. And so if you can get this tiny molecule right down there, you can start to answer questions about what happens to a local magnetic field in a 2D material. So both understanding those properties and designing molecules that interface with questions like that is something that we're really excited about. And we're also excited about a lot of biological applications that I would be happy to talk about. But thinking about the magnetic field at chromium triiodide and whether quantum sensing in a molecule can help with that is probably where my head is at this particular moment in time.
Could you elaborate on one aspect of that? I'm really fascinated by the use of sensors in this odd way. How does the field of quantum information science and quantum computing help in the kind of vision that you just described?
So that's a good question. I'm not sure I would call it quantum information, right? Quantum technology, broadly speaking. But so the way that you would read out a magnetic field locally, and we could have an extensive discussion about what quantum means that I think you would have a lot of insight into, by modulating so you're creating a local magnetic field and you're splitting of your m sub s levels, and you're changing not just your axial splitting, but your rhombic splitting as well. And so that should give you, especially because you can specifically orient molecules relative to a surface, that should give you spatial resolution for the magnetic field. And so optically reading out this information, just like NV centers, you should be able to get an optical probe. Now, is changing the separation of m sub s levels truly quantum? That's a broad discussion.
I think I would agree with you, but if I may translate you.
Oh, yes,
Let me
sorry.
see if I got the translation correct. Does this mean that an iQuHACkathon student who's working with Qiskit might be able to come up with a sequence of control pulses for your molecular system?
Yes.
Which would then contort it in such a way that it'd be able to sense better?
Yes, quite possibly. That is a really great suggestion. And because I'm a chemist, a lot of the actual quantum operations we do aren't necessarily more sophisticated than what a protein structural biologist would do with nuclear magnetic resonance to decipher structure. You do a lot of correlative spectroscopy. And we were just talking before the panel started about one of the pioneers of this field, Alex Pines. And so the library of ways to control pulses and magnetic resonance is broad. And my lab effectively steals that existing technology because our main contribution is making and designing the things, and then we borrow the technology. But there's this amazing space in between that Ike is really pointing to with the ability to control this at a more sophisticated level.
So your message to our audience here and out in the virtual world might be that everything you're doing that you think is working on quantum computation could actually make chemistry better.
Yes.
Oh, there's a but coming.
There's a giant caveat. One of my personal crusades that I think at least Will has been unfortunately subjected to is that the space of quantum computing as applied to chemistry requires more caveats than is frequently expressed.
What's one of those caveats, though? Because actually, the reason I'm keeping you from going on is so that I can say less later, but also because and this is important to y'all. I think what Donna's doing is actually useful. Okay. Seriously.
That's good. I'm not sure I do.
But like more useful than a lot of what's happening in quantum computing today. So what are one of the caveats? Because really, there are real big problems.
Yeah, so I would say that the phrasing the questions correctly is really important. So one of the, so to pick on approximately half of the sponsors of this event, one of the classic things that you'll see for why quantum computing is useful is to understand things like the mechanism of nitrogenase. I mean, have you seen these slightly horrifying Google videos with some guy standing in front of a cornfield? Anyway, there is an enzyme that turns N2 into ammonia. It uses the process that we use commercially, the Haber-Bosch process, uses 2% of the world's energy, et cetera. This is very close to my field. But the problem is the argument that you're going to use a quantum computer to find the ground state of a catalyst to understand it better does not hold water, because the ground state is intrinsically not the thing that does the thing, right? So, and I'm not saying that this is a bad area, actually. I think nitrogenase is a fascinating and important problem, but there, the excited state is the thing that does everything. And so with a quantum computer, even though you're getting to an absolute ground state, you're already bracketed pretty well as to what the ground state is. And so this, to me, is a good example of you need to identify questions where a more precise computation will solve the problem. And I think that there are, for nitrogenase, I think looking at a failed catalyst would actually be much more powerful. looking at a library of failed catalysts and seeing if there are common features. There are a lot of ways that you could imagine using computational power to approach these questions, and you all will think of ways that haven't been approached before. But there is a problem, computing will power us through it, is to me insufficient, especially as we start to approach chemical questions, which are absolutely messy and complicated.
Thank you. Beware the hubris of computer science.
I mean, computer scientists are pretty amazing, right? I have an iPhone that is so much more amazing than my first computer that I could actually literally take apart. I cannot take apart an iPhone.
They can't put together nitrogenase molecules.
Yeah, so my group works on superconducting qubits, and I think many of you this weekend will probably program a superconducting quantum computer, a small one, from IBM using Qiskit. And so these superconducting qubits are basically electrical circuits. They're resonators. And the one feature of them, though, is that when you cool them down to very low temperatures, they sort of behave like atoms in the sense that they have discrete energy levels. So they're quantum mechanical. And of course, in quantum computing, we tend to use the ground state and the first excited state. We call that a qubit. What my group's working on primarily, I'd say, are a couple directions. One is, why doesn't that thing work better? What's preventing it from being like a natural atom? Like, Ike works with natural atoms, ions, and they have lifetimes that are so long, hours, maybe, even longer. But our superconducting circuits, their lifetimes are maybe 100 microseconds. What's limiting that? Why can't it be longer? Well, we've solved many of those problems over the years. We have more to go. 20 years ago, it was a nanosecond. And today, it's 100 microseconds or more. And it comes down to materials, fabrication, how you design that circuit. It all matters, as you might imagine. Everything matters. So one thrust of the group is trying to make these qubits better and better and better, because if they have higher coherence, that tends to lead to higher fidelity, and that's really what you want. It's how many of these gates can I apply to my quantum computer before it starts to fall apart and lose the quantum information. The second part of the group focuses on larger circuits. Like, we have a 16-qubit chip, 21-qubit chip, and what we're trying to do there is study entanglement, primarily, manifestations of entanglement. How does entanglement start? How does it propagate? When it propagates, how do I benchmark that complicated entanglement state? Sometimes people call it many-body localization or many-body entanglement. I don't know that we have many bodies yet. Maybe FBE is better, few-body entanglement. So 16, 20, something like that. But even at that scale, it's very complicated to understand how it's working and how to benchmark. It's very expensive, as you'd imagine, because one of the hallmarks of quantum computing is that as you increase the number of qubits, it gets exponentially more complex, exponentially larger state space. And so benchmarking even 16 or 20 qubits, while possible, is very, very challenging. Yeah, so those are the kinds of research directions we do. Maybe the last thing that's interesting, and a recent paper we had, was we coupled a superconducting molecule, so 2 qubits that were entangled, to a waveguide. And based on the entanglement we created, we could have that artificial molecule emit a photon to the left by choice or to the right by choice. And in the jargon of the field, we'd say this is chiral. It's a chiral or directional photon emission. The reason that's interesting is if we didn't play that trick and the photons just emitted, it actually goes in both directions until we detect it and then you resolve it. But it's 50-50 which way it goes. But by being able to choose which direction it goes, we can now connect modules, small-scale processors, together, processor A to processor B, or let's do processor C instead, just by choosing which way the photon goes. And so that's a recent paper that we just had. And now we're working on catching the photon. We know how to emit it, now we want to catch it.
I'm curious, based on your last question, how many of you here are here because you want to, you're inspired by doing a cool science project with quantum computing? How many of you are here because you're inspired by making quantum computers useful for mankind to solve problems like the excited state of nitrogenase? Actually, it's about half-half, or maybe the second half was shy about answering that question after Donna. But Will, you mentioned these IBM processors that are based on what you've built.
Yeah.
How will these folks in the audience be able to tell this weekend whether IBM's actually letting them use their processor, or if they're simulating them with a classical computer behind the scenes?
Well, that's a really good question. I think you said a bit, and which way you said it, 0 or 1, it's going to send it to either the simulator or the quantum computer. But you could do benchmarking yourself, and I would encourage you to do that, is benchmark your quantum computers, right? And you can run your algorithm, whatever it is. Algorithm could be generic, it doesn't have to be solving a specific problem. A sequence of gates is an algorithm, and you could benchmark that quantum computer and look for the reality that you get out. A real quantum computer is going to have errors, and you will see those errors.
You're saying the real quantum computer sucks compared with a classical computer?
Well, I didn't quite go that far, but the real quantum computer today, if you look at IBM's quantum computers, which are at the forefront or close to the forefront, they have what's known as quantum volumes, and basically what that is how many qubits can I run for how many steps? And there's an algorithm that does that, but it's basically, can I do 3 qubits for 3 steps before I lose it, 4 qubits for 4 steps, 5 for 5, et cetera. And whatever that number is, that's your quantum volume. And to make it sound bigger, they'll take 2 to that number, so 2 to the 5th or 2 to the 6th. And the quantum volumes today are around 7 or 8 qubits. I can run 7 qubits for a depth of 7 gates. And on the one hand, you'd say, I wish I had more, because we want to have more, right? And that's what research I'm doing and many others is let's make those qubits better so we can get more. On the other hand, from the perspective of someone who's been in the field for 20 years, I'd say, wow, that's pretty darn good, because I remember when we started, it wasn't even 1. It was probably 0. So you will use, this is, I think, very exciting, is that you're going to use a quantum computer, a small-scale quantum computer, whether it's IBM's or IonQ's or whoever's it is. You're here at the very beginning, right? We're just getting to the point where we can really online access a quantum computer, run an algorithm, get some results out, compare it to what the simulator told us we should get. And for many of the algorithms you write, you'll see that those line up, right? To answer your question though, like, how do you tell the difference? Let's say that the quantum volume is 7. Try 10, because the simulator will tell you what that answer is for 10, and it will be the answer to the problem you're posing or trying to solve. But on the real quantum computer, it won't look as good. And the more complexity you add, either more qubits or more depth, the less and less it will look like that simulated result.
Sadly today, but maybe it'll change. Maybe that's why you're here, because there's hope for better in the future.
Indeed.
But not quite yet.
Not yet. But we can do real things. We can have hackathons.
And we can do really awesome science today, but not quite yet do something useful.
Or commercial, maybe.
Commercially useful.
Yes,
That
indeed.
sounds like a great segue to Sloan School.
I don't think we can reorder things that much. Quantum matrices, when you multiply them in different ways, they give different results.
Okay, I will take the privilege of being elderly to skip and come back at the end.
Well, that hierarchy sounds right to me, that you can pull rank. At the research group, the IDE, the Initiative of Digital Economy, we look at all kinds of technologies and how they impact the economy. But one way to think about this is around timescales, because when we're looking at technologies that have been out there for quite a while, we could look at how they're impacting the total economy. So not just even the US economy, but global trade and lots of other nations. So if you look at the silicon chip revolution, that's out there everywhere, and we can see it in productivity, and we can see it in labor markets, and we can see it possibly even in things like inequality in the economy. And there are a lot of other very interesting technologies that are so well deployed across the total economy that that's the aperture that we look at them. But something like quantum computing is not in the economy today. It has no measurable impact whatsoever. So what lens are we going to use to have a look at this? Obviously, it raises a whole bunch of very different questions and very different things that we should be looking at. We try to add as much precision as we can to the discussion. We think that's important here at MIT, and especially, obviously, we're a social science, and when you're dealing with social scientists, things are more probabilistic than deterministic. So we're trying to look at quantum computing and be precise about where it might have a fundamental impact on something economic. So let me give you an example. When the internal combustion engine came along, it enabled a dramatic drop in the cost of transportation. So having to go somewhere on a bicycle is very expensive, with time, and now you can drive large distances in your car. So it makes sense. So travel was disrupted enormously at the economic level. You could look at loads of other examples, such as maybe search engines with Google. Previously, you had to go to a library and do some physical searching, and Google made it basically free and instant and perfect. We need to understand what, in the economy, quantum computing is going to have the similar effect for. It's not entirely obvious right now, but the more precise we can be about it, the better informed we can have decisions or discussions around, is it going to impact chemistry, et cetera, et cetera. And so I think that's a really big question that we can look at in places like the Sloan School. And it will enable us to have a much better foundation when we start making discussions about predictions of what impact it's going to have. So trying to get all the way down and working closely with the likes of yourselves in this room helps us better inform that.
Can I try a question about that, though? He didn't sound very excited about this. Given your resource modeling, and given the fact that resources are constrained, you all in the audience can't simultaneously be working on 5 different projects, or maybe you can, but it's not as easy. Would a student here be better off working on quantum computing, fusion, or high-temperature superconductivity? Not to equate them in any way.
Yeah, easy question. I know the answer to that. No, of course. I think that I wouldn't be making a decision across those 3 choices based on your potential to get rich. Mm-hmm. If you're going to enter a field like the things you're discussing, you have to have a love for them, because it's going to take a long time, decades, for any of the topics that you've talked about before you get rich or have an impact, and expect that you're going to go through peaks and troughs amongst your family and friends when they ask you what you're doing. Yes, you're very cool today because you're doing quantum computers, but that might not always be the case. So unless you have the passion for it, I wouldn't be picking the decision based on where I think the jobs are going to be, or necessarily where I think I'm going to start the next company and become the next Bill Gates. But I will say it lends itself, that question, into another area that's a big, I would say, question amongst business people who are looking at this, which is there's a lot of excitement, and rightly so, about quantum computing today. Okay, I can see it in the room, and the people I talk to at conferences, it's brilliant to see. But there's a wider group in this community of stakeholders, of investors, governments, large corporations, who are all getting involved. And it's an interesting business question as to how a field is going to maintain an appropriate, that's a difficult word, right? But an appropriate level of excitement about the field, without it oscillating between overexcitement in winters and up and down and everything in between. And yet there's no overlord in control of all of this excitement levels where we can just move it up and down. So how is this field which offers so much potential, going to make sure that it's able to ride the wave sufficiently?
And get a soft landing.
Yeah, well, I would hope that it'll be a very exciting landing, but the journey and the stakeholder expectations are going to be an important part of this. And I think we, at places like the Sloan School, can add to that understanding.
Wait, I've got to ask one more question about that. Has there ever been an emerging technology of such high impact potential which did not oscillate up and down many cycles?
I think that the oscillation is amplified today. And it's been juiced because we have access to enhanced financial markets. And that juices everything that you're seeing in terms of expectations, in terms of the bets being made and blah, and blah, 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 blah. So I think that all major technologies take decades to move from a lab through to really having an impact on the economy. Just adding loads of money, which is what it's not all we're doing at the moment, we do lots of it at the moment, doesn't always help. And I will say one other thing to this community. Technology adoption is a complicated business. Let me give you you probably all assume, as soon as we build a quantum computer, okay, not that simple, but as soon as we do, surely industry will just take us up on it. You might have noticed, that's not always the case. You might have noticed I've got an Irish accent. I go over and back across the Atlantic on a regular basis. I would love to take the Concorde, but it's not available to me. Yet there's a technology that would make my life better. There's lots of complicated social and economic and business model reasons why technologies flourish or sit on shelves. And we want to make sure that quantum computing is being supported to make sure that the best results for our communities can be realized.
Does that mean that you are in favor of like the VC economy and the drive that they push to move the derivatives up and down faster so that they can ride the waves?
Well, you could look at it I tend to support it, that it's not a perfect system, but it still, I think in a lot of cases, I don't believe in total free market, unregulated, everything, blah, blah, blah. But I think in a lot of situations, it can be very helpful, but it depends on the subject area,
Yeah. Should I ask you one more question?
I mean, I feel like, I doubt the audience came to listen to me, but anyway. Yeah.
Well, okay, Dirk, with apologies to you, just one last thing. How many billions of dollars do you think it will take quantum to make it become real?
Do you not think you should have gone to the other side to ask Will actually wants the check.
I wanted to mention, I definitely encourage folks to discuss, and if, for example, Will wanted to answer that question, you're more than welcome to.
Or maybe you'd like to.
And Ike is certainly
like a few billion yourself.
I would absolutely love a few billion, but I'm not going to promise I'll have a working quantum computer in a few years.
But it's probably going to be billions. You didn't laugh at my question.
It definitely is billions.
Yeah.
I would say T.
Yeah,
I would say it's $1 trillion or more. Hey, we think back to the last century, right, and how semiconductor classical computers, conventional, right? They hate it when we say classical. So conventional computers developed. And think of all the investment that went into that. And ask yourself, when did we have a conventional computer? What day did that happen? Because we often get asked, when are we going to have a quantum computer? Okay, well, when did we have a conventional computer? It's very hard to pinpoint the date because you have to say, well, what type of conventional computer? Do you mean an abacus? Do you mean a mechanical computer? Do you mean a vacuum tube computer? Do you mean something that could add two numbers together? Or do you mean an iPhone, right? When did it happen? And of course, the reality is that it evolved over several decades of time. Transistor was invented in '47 at Bell Labs. But here we are today making multi-core processors with what? M2 has now 100 billion transistors on it. That's still the technology, and that's what, 7 decades or more.
Trillions.
And trillions of dollars, with an S even now. So it's going to take a lot of money, but it is beginning and it is unfolding now. Now, will we have full at-scale quantum computers commercialized to the same level as our conventional computers today? Is it the next information processing revolution? I don't think we can answer that today. I don't think we know, right?
Yeah, Dirk or Ike, if you'd like to tell us about the...
But I can say something to that question.
Oh, yeah, please.
So yeah, in my lab, I'll bring it back to the M's maybe in terms of money rather than the T's. But it's kind of scary, yeah. I guess the thing that drives me is that I'm convinced that in some time in the future, maybe it's the end of this decade, maybe it's by 2050 or so, we will do many things in different ways than we do today. We will build machines that are able to encode information and process information on the single particle level. And there's really interesting things that happen there, whether it's, you call that sort of semi-classical or fully quantum computing. This is the physics of computing, which is a term that Ike likes to use as well. And that I think is a good example of, we have a renaissance in computing, right? You no longer go the sort of just, make transistors smaller and get more on the chip and so on. No, there's a need to think bigger, think differently. And I do believe that in the future we will compute and process information in new ways. And that's sort of like the major goal, the goalpost. Actually, even when you think about what people say analog computers, what really does it mean for a computer to be analog? Think about just the word itself is often misunderstood. Ultimately, when we make a measurement, as far as I know in physics, it's every single measurement is actually a discrete number. It's not some like arbitrary continuous number. It's a discrete number, right? So there's a lot that we can learn and maybe use that's not the quantum computing in the sense that we think about today. Perhaps, but there's many forms of computing with physics. And I think that's sort of like the driving goal. Just very concretely, we work on technology to control quantum computers, like large-scale optical systems, to control with our collaborators in the Center for Ultra-Cold Atoms, to control large numbers of neutral atoms that are laser-cooled. I think iQuERA is the company that's part of this hackathon. So we're looking to build the controllers for those. And so it's a big goal, and like in some sense, maybe one would shy away from this, oh my God, it's going to be $1 trillion to build it. But my experience has been when you set a big goalpost and you make an incremental advance towards that big goal, it's much more impactful than having a home run on an incremental problem in the first place. And that's like in my lab, when we try to build the hardware to control 10 million qubits or so, it is really hard to do, but you know you're going in the right direction, and there's discoveries along the way. One of them being that we learned how to process information just purely optically and to make new like machine learning accelerators that actually might have are a good example of how you can use physics in a new way to make useful computing machines. And that led to a startup, Light Matter, that's now taken on Intel and NVIDIA and so on to make super fast machine learning machines. So big message for me has been take something, an important problem, no matter how hard it is, work your way towards it, and in doing so, there's a lot of interesting problems that you have to solve along the way. And in that way, actually, I was just looking at everybody here, I have some project in common with each of you guys. We talked about optical control recently. We have some dilution refrigerator experiments going on together on quantum transduction. We're working on, I hope that Dana succeeds in building new kinds of qubits that would make the physical layer better. I'd like to talk to you about a project we recently started on quantifying the utility of quantum internet that we termed the quantum network utility. It's a market-based argument for performance metric. And so, like, when you have a big problem, there's so many different parts that have to come together. You find yourself discovering new areas of science and technology and lots of interesting people. and that's been great for me. So, and I think my group altogether would agree that it's a fun place to be in.
Take a poll. How many think I should ask Dirk a question? Oh no. How many think I should go ahead and just say something on my own spiel?
Wait,
No
I want the
hands. I
option
see
for
no
both.
hands.
I want the option for both.
Go ahead.
I want the option for both.
Oh gosh, everything.
You have two hands?
Yeah.
For both too.
Well, Dirk, you mentioned two very different sectors, light matter and the machine learning optical computing. By the way, how many of you ever heard of optical computing before? Yeah? Do you know, so I worked as an undergraduate here 30 years ago. I went to Bell Labs and worked in the optical computing department at Holmdel. And I saw my boss go off on ABC Nightly News on television, if you've ever heard of what that is, and say to the world, at that time the world did watch TV, that their electrical computers were going to be replaced by optical computers with photons going through the circuits and no more electrons because it was faster, it was lower power, it was much more capable of instantaneous matrix multiplication.
Oh.
What happened? I went to meetings just like this with all of you optical computing enthusiasts sitting in the audience. What happened? The field crashed and burned. And then turned into a telecommunication revolution, which has changed the world, but in a completely different way than expected. So, Dirk, how would you compare and contrast your quantum controllers effort with the two amazing startups you've already spun off, like Light Matter on machine learning? Which one is going to have higher impact? Which one do you believe more in? Which one are you more excited about for the students today?
I don't pick any favorites amongst children. So I think I don't have anything against electrons. I don't have anything against photons or for photons. I think they're all great because it is true that people in the 1980s already recognized the potential of optics in computing. It takes Fourier transforms automatically. It does do matrix multiplication ultra fast at the speed of light, and you can do many fascinating things with it. And then came the electrons and CMOS scaling and so on, worked terribly well. But I strongly believe in reasoning things through from first principles. So don't let the past failure of this or that dissuade you. Like, why didn't it work? It didn't have a fundamental reason it didn't work, if you look through it. So a lot of people say, oh, optical computing, it can't work. And I think Ike said it sort of, to inspire some conversation here, right?
Yes.
And people say, oh, it's been tried. Well, electric cars had been tried in 1880. I think one of the first automobiles, some of the first automobiles were electric. I think maybe the first.
Yeah.
And Mercedes-Benz came along, developed a combustion engine, and perhaps unfortunately they took off. But now we see a resurgence of electric cars. It was never a bad idea to make electric cars. The technology had to be right, and things are lots, like there's randomness, right, in technology and in society. And so, but we can hope that generally we go in the right direction. Hope. So optical computing has a lot of inherent things going for it. Like you can compute at a ridiculously low energy consumption. And which one is going to be more impactful? I don't know. I have really no idea. And I don't think about it that way. I'm not placing bets. I do it because it's fun. And as long as it's exciting and we can learn something, I'm very happy to invest my time in it. I guess one thing I would say about the quantum computing, the way I would describe it there is I invest my time into it because on the one hand, like it's a lottery ticket that there's some probability that in this cycle it will actually sort of revolutionize technology, maybe by the end of the decade or so. And that's a guessing game. Right? I don't know, 10% chance, I would say. Maybe by the end of the decade, we will have maybe useful quantum computers. I'm fairly optimistic on this, but I would say it's a good chance, like definitely non-zero, and I think that's pretty awesome. But what I know for sure is that it's an admission ticket to new discovery, to understanding the world better, and that certainly is good enough for me.
What a beautiful answer. Isn't that great? what you have heard is do it for curiosity. Do it for possibilities that might help the world, a new quantum revolution. Do it for science. Do it because it can let you measure and control things you've never done before. Did you hear from anyone? Do it because it helps today's world? Or you can actually build a bigger quantum computer to outspeed classical computers? No. And so what I'm doing in my work is trying to figure out an answer to that question. You know, one of the frightening realities of quantum computers today is that quantum algorithms, there are very, very few of them, very few new, truly new quantum algorithms. It's really just down to phase estimation, which is a generalization of Shor's algorithm. I hope you all realize this concretely. All these other variants that do different forms of like nitrogenase quantum simulation, or you name it all. They're just variants of one algorithm, including Haro-Hasidim-Lloyd for linear systems. That's a variation of Shor's algorithm as well. So one of the interesting stories that my group was able to discover last year is that Shor's algorithm, the simulation algorithm of Seth Lloyd and Richard Feynman, the search algorithm of Grover, which has a square root speed up, they're actually all the same single algorithm, literally, exactly, mathematically. And we have a paper called The Grand Unification of Quantum Algorithms. And each of these algorithms is described by a single vector of real numbers, phases, and the structure of the algorithm is exactly identical, and it is quantum signal processing, the kind of stuff that Will was studying. And that means that we encompass all of them in one framework, but we don't yet know what really new quantum algorithms exist, even beyond this. And I think this is a really big problem for the field, because really, it's missing VisiCalc. I don't know, you don't know what VisiCalc is, sorry. That is the single application that made personal computers take off and actually become economically important and useful, done by the folks who ended up like Mitch Kapoor and stuff, and who set up Lotus over here. That's our big problem for the field today. The reality is that quantum computers are not economically useful today, exactly like you said. There is that word, the today. It might be tomorrow, but I think it's going to depend on you here. Those of you who have creativity, who have come from different fields, have different problems, they can come and see what quantum computers might be able to solve that we haven't thought of before. That's why I think you're important. Because at the same time right now, I also talk with a bunch of colleagues who are busy building a Noah's Ark for the field so that they can bring in two of the best of everyone for the period that might be coming. Well, the word is quantum winter, so that the field can be rescued through its trove of disillusionment and will still exist in 20 years from now and can revive itself. There is this sentiment going around, and you've got to know about it, because it could go that way or could go a different way, but it's depending on you here. So welcome to MIT.
I have a follow-up question for you. So, Peter Shor came up with his factoring algorithm in his head, maybe on pieces of paper or using a small conventional computer. But the person who came up with VisiCalc, I don't think they pictured the whole program in their head and just like wrote it out. Do you think it's going to take actual people working on actual quantum computers, like these students, to come up with these next applications? Or do you think because of the kind of inherent structure in these quantum algorithms we've seen so far, that it's really going to take this, I guess, the strategy that's resulted in the existing algorithms so far?
What a great, wonderful question. Peter Shor, the story is the following. Peter Shor was homesick, and he was reviewing a paper. You know, academics review papers from peers to try to see about acceptance in a major conference. That's what Peter was doing. And by reading this paper, he got an idea, and he happened to know that if you could find periods in a certain function, then it could solve the factoring problem of integers. And the paper did not connect it with the problem, but Peter knew the problem, and he connected them together. He had to add a piece, which is to make appropriate Fourier transform. So, as you hear from Kevin, what is needed is not just somebody sitting in a room, but somebody who has the two pieces together, the problem, the knowledge of what is possible. I think you would say the same in Sloan for all sorts of emerging technologies, in chemistry, in solid-state physics. You've got to know those two basic pieces put together. So I cannot, as myself, just sit in a room and invent something like this. I think it really takes a vast diversity of experiences and understandings of what is needed and what problems exist in other fields so that you can overcome this and come up with the right innovation. It's actually a fun thing to ask oneself, what is needed for innovation in a field? And it is a lot of these kinds of ingredients. And by the way, I'm thankful for all of you taking my questions so well. I hope you realize I treat almost every interaction like an oral exam. And it is your turn to get back at revenge at me, as Kevin is demonstrating.
I don't know that it's revenge, but I do think that your singular value decomposition paper that you just referenced from last year, the unification of quantum algorithms, I think that's why that's such an important paper. And I haven't had a chance to tell like this, but I think that's such an important paper because what you just said, I think, is so true, that you need both pieces, right? And so by being able to abstract all known quantum algorithms into a single framework allows more people to understand the quantum algorithms that we have today. And then others who have different life experience, different backgrounds, different expertise, can now understand quantum algorithms in general, and then ask, okay, with this framework, how do I now apply that or tweak those phases, so to speak, to apply to this problem, right? And it's so important because before this paper, there were these different classes of algorithms, but how they connected to one another, it was almost like we just grabbed different ideas out of space somehow, and they gave either quadratic speed up or almost exponential, but they're the same. And that's amazing.
Thank you. What's the question?
Oh, there was no question.
Okay, actually, there is an implied question there, which I'll ask myself. What in the world is the use of all of this if I've just shown a general framework? What do you think?
Oh. Well, do you see how he did that? He turned the question around to me. He's very clever, this guy. So the reason if you think about engineering and science generally, what do we do? What do we do over and over and over again? We abstract, and we try to reduce and understand things at a fundamental level. We see two things that might be related, but they're disparate to us in our understanding. And then we dig into it and we realize, oh, if I just understand this higher level concept, then I can understand both of these by this framework, right? And that's what I think the importance of this algorithm is it creates a framework for people to think and understand quantum algorithms and then take the next step.
We might speculate further along this line because it's not necessarily a mathematical problem alone that might be solved. It might be a game theory problem. It might be something that involves multiple parties in a market together. Like, what is a quantum auction? And people have looked at in previous hackathons, what is a quantum chess game? When you have multiple parties with differential knowledge and different goals and ambitions and capabilities. And quantum changes the rules of many of these things, changes Nash equilibria. But we don't know the right way to think about this today. So maybe it won't be quantum computers, but it might be quantum networks with sending qubits back and forth somehow. Or it might be quantum sensors, when queried in the right way, with some molecules being purely classical, some others being partly quantum, and some being purely quantum. It might be an interaction of this funky grand unification model acting as a neural network, co-processing together with Dirk's light matter processor. These are real possibilities, and I have no idea what the answer will be there because I don't know the right problems. And that's just one of the fun things about interacting with the marketplace, because it might be that Mercedes-Benz coming along with some interesting market problem, yeah?
And I'll add one other complexity, as if it wasn't complex enough. The market's not static either. Over the time frame we're talking about, loads of other variables, loads of other technologies are going to emerge, become redundant. So it's a fun and interesting and complex future.
Right. And they're competitors. I mean, why are we working on quantum computers instead of working on the ability to build our computers into DNA strands so that I can just put it in the ground and water it and have a computer grow out of the ground? And then solve all of our food problems without nitrogenase being fixed. You know, there are amazing things we could be spending our time on, but you've got to be creative about it. I hope this is reasonable.
I have a question for you.
Oh, go.
I do have a question for Ike. So, and it's related to what you're going to be doing over the next 24 hours. I would love to hear your thoughts on this, because I think about it sometimes. You're going to program a quantum computer, right? And if we look at let's take a step back. If you look at conventional computers today, you represent the program and you represent the data and you process that data, and it's all the same transistors. And that's called homoiconicity. Everything is represented the same way, the instructions as well as the data. But what you're going to do tomorrow is different. It's heteroiconic. You're going to program a quantum computer, and the data are quantum, but your program is done on a classical computer. And that's how we do all of our programming today. And I'm asking Ike because he just unified what we know about quantum algorithms within this heteroiconic framework. And I'm wondering, what do you think about a homoiconic version of programming quantum computers?
That's a fantastic question.
Thank you.
I have
Please tell me the answer.
I have no idea. Next. No, honestly, Will. Look, today we're actually moving in a very interesting direction in computing, high-performance computing. For the first time, we not only have CPUs, but we have GPUs. We have co-processors at all sorts of levels, different levels of caches, for example, and we need to harness all of these. Remember, think of Google. Google is one of the biggest computers in the world, but it's a distributed computer, unlike just a computer you have on your desktop. A whole slew of new ideas had to be developed to harness distributed, fault-tolerant classical computers. We haven't even begun to think about distributed, fault-tolerant quantum computers, much less the fundamental questions that you're asking just now. We need new programming languages.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. And if we're going to have auctions, we're going to have communication networks as part of this, and protocols for communicating quantum bits sometimes and classical bits at sometimes. You know what this whole networked system looks like? Biology or chemistry. It really is what is happening at the low level of real chemical systems. Actually, tell us about photosynthesis. Isn't it a lot like this? Not to ask you a question or anything.
I probably don't have enough time to describe the entirety of photosynthesis.
You have 9 minutes.
But yeah, I mean, your photon management and your electron management comprise a very large part of chemistry overall, right? If you think about any light-activated reaction, thinking about those transitions between different energy levels, there are theories about potential quantum interactions that have to do with the light, but we're going to stay away from that field for now. And then chemistry fundamentally has to do with the movement of electrons. I mean, that is the entire field. How many of you have taken organic chemistry? Oh, that's awesome. That's so much more than I thought. Right? You spend all of your time in organic chemistry using arrows to denote the movement of electrons. I mean, that's what you do. You have an arrow, and your arrow shows your electrons going from point A to point B. And that is a whole year of organic chemistry. I mean, there are other things, but that's it, right? That's a mechanism. Your electrons move in this way, and they always move in this way. And you can think about processes like tunneling. An MIT chemist in my department, Joanne Stubby, has done amazing work on one of the mysteries of biology, that in an enzyme called ribonucleotide reductase, you have an electron that somehow manages to traverse 35 angstroms without stopping. How does it do that? Does it tunnel? Does it tunnel for part of the way? Is there some sort of invisible chain? Anyway, this borders on quantum communication, thinking about how we transmit these objects that are inherently quantum, electrons and photons, across interfaces that we can't fully characterize, that we can well characterize.
Yes, and the thing that you were avoiding talking about there is this paper from Berkeley that is showing that photosynthesis might be Grover's algorithm in action. Yes?
I'm familiar with that work.
Yeah, and isn't that a fascinating idea that your plants are generating energy, harvesting photons and turning that into ATP and ADP from ADP to ATP because of Grover's algorithm? It actually might be correct. I mean, it seems like nature is using a lot of these quantum coherent evolutions as heterogeneous blocks of not maybe computation, but
no, I mean, there are multiple types of coherences, right? There's electronic and vibrational coherences, and in different forms, those could contribute to a lot of plant biology. And there's an entire field of so-called quantum biology, which is largely devoted to studying the potential quantum components in these biological systems, a large part of which was kicked off by Graham Fleming's paper, which was just referenced.
Yeah. So in some sense, Dirk, in your future, maybe it won't be light matter, but like chemical light matter or something, because you might harness many of these heterogeneous units.
Yeah, it's still light matter in that case. But my students started the company, right?
Yes,
it's their choice of name. But I would, by the way, the photosynthesis, I thought you wanted some decoherence there.
Isn't that tricky? Everything you're going to do in the next few days will abhor decoherence. But the reason you're alive is because of decoherence. Yes, absolutely. So
the random walk of, it's this random walk of this excited state of, in this molecule. And some argument is that it's an interplay between coherence and decoherence that makes it sufficiently efficient.
So I don't want to cut off this fascinating conversation, but we only have 5 minutes left. So I wanted to ask our wonderful panel if they have any words of wisdom or advice for the young folks about to embark on this hackathon. Please start in whatever order you prefer.
Okay.
Dana, if you'd like to, or Dirk, if you'd like to start. Not to pick on.
Question everything. I think that's one thing we've learned from here. Don't just take somebody's word for it. Just question it. Think it through. And don't shy away from trying something really hard. If you succeed partially, it will. It's a net benefit, I would say. So as you program, try the tough thing, and if you go even halfway or some partial way towards that goal, you've done something great.
I would encourage you to use this hackathon not just to build your technical skills, but to build mini communities. So become friends with somebody, talk to loads of people, find your tribe that you can talk about these challenges and these technologies beyond the hackathon.
Look to the fundamentals. Don't just try to optimize for the short term, but look to where you want to be in 10 years and move systematically towards that end.
Yeah, and follow your passion. Think, but don't think for too long. Act, because when you do things, things get done. It's amazing. And so, have a great time over the next 24 hours doing things.
I don't know how I can follow all of that. There are a lot of entry points to quantum, broadly speaking. I think my best advice is in the MIT Museum, the room with all the mechanical exhibits is really soothing if you need a break. I love the chair that comes apart, very relaxing. Good luck.
Good luck.
Good luck, yeah.
we conclude our wonderful panel. Let's thank our panelists again. I wish we had another hour for them to discuss, but you have to move on to doing some quantum hacking. So let's thank them again.
Wow. Hello? Wow. That was inspiring, right? Can we get another round of applause, please? We have a few gifts for our panelists. So yeah, we're going to distribute them now. And while we're doing that, let me just tell you what's up next. So we have our first round of workshops in about 30 minutes. There are some refreshments that should be outside. One workshop will be held in this space by IonQ, and the other will be held in the space that you were in for networking, room 32144 by Quantinuum. So again, in 30 minutes, please take a moment to get refreshments. And I just want to call out that by the end of today, you must submit your team as well as your challenge preference. So for those details, please go to the in-person Slack channel. And yeah, thanks again to the panelists, to our wonderful moderator, and to Valeria for putting this all together. So yeah, see y'all. We have a lot to do.